I'm going to go ahead and dive right in and introduce Mitch. Mitch Dobrowner, who is our guest of the evening, fine art photographer. Mitch grew up in New York on Long Island, and you can tell that from his accent. As a teen, his father gave him an old Argus 35mm rangefinder camera, and Mitch quickly became addicted to photography and was inspired by great photographers of the past, especially Ansel Adams and the other classics. At 21, he quit his job and left Long Island to see the American Southwest, and he met his wife in California, had 3 children, and there established a digital design studio and got all caught up in work, business, and family took priority, and photography did not. So he stopped taking pictures for years, but inspired by his family and friends later, he began to make photographs in early 2005, and since then has been on a mission to create images that help evoke how he sees our amazing planet. He lives with his wife Wendy, son Joshua, dog Jet, and cat Jax in Los Angeles, and also has a place in Lone Pine, California. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Mitch, and he can take it from there. I'll mute and jump in when I have a question. We'll just sort of share screen, show him, he can show some images, and take it away.
Okay, good. Well, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Julia. And thank you to everybody at LACP for just having me. So first, I'm just going to share my screen. Good. You guys see that okay?
That looks great, Mitch. Yeah,
okay,
full screen.
Yeah, so I'm just going to just talk in front of the images. Basically, for me, just so I get it off my chest, I'm just a simple little peon. I'm nothing special, you know. Photography for me has really been something that's really been a gift in my life. It's taught me, it's introduced me to an amazing amount of people. It's taught me pretty much how to be a better person, how to be more patient, how to focus and concentrate. And as I talk and I go through all the imagery, really, the images for me speak more about me than any words that I could really say. Photography for me, and I think probably for everybody out there, this is the way that I see the world. It's my vision. I really started taking pictures by accident, really, when I was probably about 17, 18. And Steve, you know, spoke a little bit about my father just giving me an August camera when I was in my late teens. It was really just to get me out of trouble, because I was pretty much growing up in New York and Long Island and about to get probably in a lot of trouble. And I started taking pictures, and as soon as I started taking pictures, for whatever reason, for me, I was totally addicted to photography. I stumbled onto the images of Ansel Adams and Minor White. Their images kind of blew my mind. I had never seen anything like that ever in my life, coming from the East Coast. I went ahead and I built a darkroom. I learned about Ansel Adams' books, the print and negative, the camera. They kind of were my Bibles. I read them, kept on reading them multiple times, and learned from them. And eventually got a, you know, for me, learned about silver gelatin printing. My cameras, I went out and got a 4x5 and an 8x10 and a 35. My 35 was kind of my point and shoot, but my 4x5 and my 8x10 were really what I was shooting with. And, you know, learned about cold light printing. Learned about all the different papers and the chemicals. And for whatever reason, I didn't want to be, I wanted to know everything about photography. So this is just a fast forward of my quick life before I get to the images. I got a job in sensitometry, and pretty much for Kodalith type films, but I didn't want to be intimidated by film and what film was and what cameras were. I wanted to know everything about it. So, you know, my first job was pretty much having acetate and silver nitrate and gelatin and a paintbrush and painting different emulsions basically, and developing them in different developers and reading them with the densitometer. And I did that for about a year, and learned everything that I could about film, so I didn't feel intimidated by it. I felt like I needed to know everything about the tools that I was using, and eventually got a job working as a freelance assistant for two photographers in Manhattan. Hashi was one who was a commercial photographer, and Pete Turner was another one who ended up being somebody that really helped me a lot. And what he taught me was don't listen to first negative feedback, and constructive criticism is awesome, but negative feedback, don't listen to that, and break every rule. There's no such thing as rules. So we went out and I listened to that, and was shooting with his help, like tungsten film and daylight. I was shooting like Ektachrome and developing in C41, which was a developer for color negative film. I started experimenting with infrared film, and just everything, every rule, every mistake that I can make, I started to break. And I started to realize that I really, and again, my foundation was always like Ansel Adams and black and white, but a lot of it initially was color. And Canon gave me a grant, and I ended up going for 4 years, 7 times cross country. And I ended up in Los Angeles and met my beautiful wife eventually, and had kids, and dropped photography probably in the 1990s. Didn't pick up a camera, well, in 1980s actually, didn't pick up a camera for like 20 years, and started picking up a camera again. I think it was about 2005. And when I first picked up the cameras, I had purchased a point and shoot for my wife, like a little 5 megapixel point and shoot. And when I picked up the camera, I saw a live view in the back of the camera. And I was like, wow, this looks like a ground glass on a 4x5. But now I'm actually looking at the feed off the sensor, and it's not upside down, backwards, and like red if I filter it red. And it opened up my eyes to like digital photography. So I started to do a transition from a film kind of wet dark room into the digital dry dark room. So anyway, again, you know, for me, the pictures are more about me than anything that I'm going to say. But I ended up really starting to understand, because I also come from a technical background. I ended up working in the studios in California, in Hollywood, in technology. So I had access to a lot of technologists to answer a lot of questions that I have. So I think what ended up for me is a lot of things had come together for me. I had run a business, a design studio with my wife, a motion graphics studio. And so I understood business. I might have a little bit of an eye for photography, and I had a technical background. And all those things started to come together in my world of photography, probably, you know, in around 2005, 2006. And I always saw, you know, I'm going to go a little bit of my vision of how I see the world. I kind of see the world, I see us as very little. I see us like we're on a rock spinning through outer space. You know, everybody, you know, photography really kind of taught me a lot about dropping my ego, and kind of like just shooting pictures and developing, starting to redevelop my vision for the way that I saw the world. So I'm going to start just going through the images. I also, as far as black and white is concerned, I've always seen in black and white. It's hard to explain, but I have a little thing where I see colors when I hear music. It doesn't affect me, but for some reason, my brain can turn things into black and white. And most of the pictures that I'll present, I kind of saw before I went out and shot them. I seen them in my mind, and a lot of times, most of the times that I go out, especially into like the Southwest, my foundation really is in landscape photography. And when I go out into the Southwest, I try to spend a lot of time at the locations. It's almost like if you're portrait photographer, you're going to want to spend time with the subject matter that you're photographing. You can look out and take a quick snapshot, but for me, with the landscapes, I feel like, every time I go out, I usually spend a day or two wasting my time, like shooting, thinking I'm going to get a picture. And I'm not. What's going on for me is I'm kind of detoxing a little bit from the world that I live in, let's say in Los Angeles, which is my home base. And it's almost, for me, I can only illustrate it as being in bright sunlight and then walking into a completely dark room and I'm not able to see for the first couple of days. But as my eyes start to adjust, I start to see as a photographer again. And it usually takes me like 2 or 3 days just to get into that mode of being able to quiet my brain and be able to see again as a photographer. So these first images I'm going to show, this one was like some of the first images I shot. This is by 2006, and this is outside of Monument Valley. And a lot of my growing up, I was always kind of into science fiction too. So the way that I've kind of see my photography is pretty much painting with light. I working in technology, I started to understand the senses that the manufacturers build. And, they build, I'll talk a little bit technical, and it might be a little technical, but I want to explain the way that I kind of develop myself. The camera manufacturers, the camera manufacturers develop their cameras basically to be color cameras. So to be able to capture color correctly, they need to capture the correct light waves, the waves that our eyes see. So our eyes see between like 400 and 700 nanometers of light. That's what we see. And senses can see more than that. Senses can see natively between, like, I'd say 300 and maybe 1100 or 1000 nanometers of light. So, the camera manufacturers, I would say, truncate their senses. They put blocking filters on to be able to block the light, so that you only capture 400 to 700 nanometers for color photography, because that's the way that they sell their cameras. And Leica's got in trouble before for opening up that blocking filter a little bit, and people were complaining about like a magenta cast, and all they were doing is trying to open up and capture as much light waves as possible. But in black and white, it opened up a whole world to me. When I used to shoot in infrared with black and white film, the filters, the infrared blocking filters, are opaque. So you'd have to compose without a filter on, and you'd have to guess what your exposure would be, and you'd have to wait until the film came back developed. And with digital cameras now, and what I was explaining about a live view, I was able to actually see the direct feed off the sensor through the live view with whatever filters that I decided to filter with. So my methodology became pretty much in photography, besides wanting to capture what I wanted to capture. I'm a terrible painter. I can't draw. I can barely speak with this accent. But I saw myself painting with light, and every scene is different. Every scene is lit differently. The light, on a sunrise compared to a sunset, or midday, or a cloudy day, or overcast day, or just light's completely different at different times of the day. Different up in Iceland compared to it is in, let's say, in Argentina or in California, and different times of year. The sun is lower in the sky, let's say later in the year, like November, and higher in the sky during the summer months. So the light is completely different. So I went back to my zone system and created kind of my own zone system for capturing black and white. And so I modified my camera because I didn't want to, again, breaking the rules, listen to whatever manufacturer said the way that I should shoot, because I'm stubborn, let's say, or I don't want people telling me what to do. And so modified my cameras. If I can get even more technical about bad patterns, and there's a bad pattern that's over a sensor because I see more green than red and blue. So there's every photo site on a camera has a pattern over it with two green filters, one red and one blue. They try to just to emulate the way our eyes see. So anyway, here we go. I'm going to start showing pictures. So this is the way that I see the world. This is Monument Valley. I never knew that spaceships were going to get into the picture there. Oops, let's see what's going on here. Okay. And a lot of what's going on with photography for me is, as photography has taught me a lot about myself. And this picture is just a really important picture to me as far as my growing up or as a photographer. And what happened is I wanted to always see shiprock. I had spent a lot of time with the Navajos and the Navajo Nation. And shiprock is like the spiritual center of the Navajo Nation. And I took my family. I saw a picture of shiprock in my mind, which was kind of this rock in motion. And I really wanted to see it. So we left California in December and drove out to Farmington and was out there for 10 days. And just to make a long story short, Farmington's like 50 miles from shiprock. So every day I would get up in the morning and I would drive 50 miles to shiprock and waste my time for the first 2 or 3 days shooting, scouting locations. And then I started really getting into it. But I never got the picture that I wanted of shiprock. And I think it was the 8th day, and I've told this story before, so I hope it's not repetitious to anybody, but on the 8th day, I got up at like 4 a.m. and it was snowing out and sleeting, and it was really cold. And I got in my truck at 4 a.m. and I stopped at a gas station that was open, got coffee. And as I was driving, my brain was like, "You're an idiot. You're not going to get anything. You're wasting your time just like you did all the other days." And I had this voice in my brain saying, "You can't do it. You're not going to get the picture you came out here for." And I kept on driving. And when I got out there, shiprock was covered in clouds. And I just went to the location that I wanted. And over time, by about 8 a.m, the clouds lifted. And the picture that I had seen in my brain, in my mind, was there. It was exactly this picture. So it taught me as a photographer that just pretty much to be tenacious, to not give up, to believe in myself that I could do the things that I believed and I set out to do. And it kind of broke me as a photographer. I would say that, it came to the thing like I think I did have a conversation once with Michael Kenna, and he had told me when I first started that, if you sweat enough blood, you draw enough blood, and you're broken enough as a photographer in a location, that maybe the photography gods will open up and say, "What the heck, here's what you came for." And that's what happened to me in this image. So this image really meant a lot to me. Out of Monument Valley, I just started seeing these volcanic structures and started shooting again. And I really do see us very small on this rocks. We think that like the house that we own or the land that it sits on and the jobs that we have and all these things are so important. But the reality is the house and the land that you own, you're just borrowing for the time that you're on Earth. We're like on this rock that's spinning through the universe. And we're just really small as compared to, how big we actually think we are. So I started going out to these remote locations and capturing what I saw, what I envisioned in my mind. Trona is a place that I've gone out to like many times in practice. And this is one of my first pictures of Trona. And I just camped out with my wife and this is like 5 a.m, the sun rising, but the sun's rising behind me, not in front of us. And I guess it was just a windy morning. And so this picture was one of my first pictures also when I started shooting again. And just as an example, when I first started shooting, I started shooting with a 10 megapixel, actually an 8 megapixel Sony camera, and then migrated up to like a 10 megapixel Sony camera. And learned how to push these cameras as far as possible, but it's also taught me that I beat the heck out of my cameras. My camera, I'm not a photographer that like shines my cameras and worships my cameras. I kind of think my cameras are like paintbrushes. They're kind of like throwaways. The lenses mean something because of the, how much they cost, I guess you could say, or how good they are, how they're mapped. But I see the cameras as being important, but it's as important as like a paintbrush. I'm going to go back into like this one. When I grew up, I've always, some of my favorite movies were like King Kong and The Wizard of Oz. And when I first saw Agatha Peak, so this is outside Monument Valley, I saw this as the Wicked Witch's Castle. That's the first impression that I got and wanted to photograph it like that. So this is the geographical like center of the Navajo Nation. And for scale, like if you look at the bottom left, I don't know if you see my thing, but like right over here, that's a little homestead as far as, but that's the scale of Agatha Peak. And I wanted to photograph it the way that I had envisioned it. Some of the other, this is Troner again. I guess this is a homage a little bit to Ansel Adams and Moonrise Hernandez, but driving out there, you have to go through an ancient lake bed, and I think it was in the middle of a big rainstorm, and I have a truck, and the water was coming up to the middle of the wheels. I didn't know how I was going to get it back off of the plateau that it was kind of on, but this is what I saw in Troner. Again, Troner is a place that I actually go a lot, just to, if I know I'm going to go out someplace to shoot, I like to go out there and kind of like practice, I would say, kind of getting my chops ready. But Troner is one of the places where Apollo first did their moonwalks, because they thought that Troner emulated close to what the surface of the moon was like. So I was developing my own vision of the way that I see the world. And for the photographers out there, which I know everybody is, everybody sees the world a different way. Even twins, even Siamese twins see the world differently. So the thing for me is I came off the shoulders of like the Ansel Adams. It sounds a little cliche, but I think that it was important for me to be able to have like a foundation for my photography and a little bit of a story. And again, this is in no way me being like I'm good or I'm pompous about anything, but I think it was back, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I won this award, Sony, like the international, the photographer of the year. But what happened was they asked me to go out to the UK and go to this award show. And I'm like, I don't want to go to the UK. I want to go to like Utah, someplace and shoot. And we went out there. I took my wife with me, and to make a long story short, again, I won the award, and I wasn't expecting it because there was so much other great photography out there. But when I went up there, what really struck me is that it wasn't really about me, but it was that like Sony at the time had recognized that that black and white photography, landscape photography, was relevant again. That the baton could be passed. It wasn't about Mitch, but a baton could be passed to the next generation of black and white landscape photographers. But that we'd have to have our own vision for what those things are. This is an area outside. This is White Pocket, and the brain rock behind it was just blew my mind when I first saw this area. And this was interesting. I got invited by the guys at Burning Man to go out to the Black Rock Desert to photograph for them. And I always wanted to photograph fly geyser. I had seen it. But this was an example as I was out there for a week, never getting what I wanted. This area also, this was like in November. So in the days, it's like, 50, 60 degrees. But when the sun goes down, it's like 10 degrees out. And it happens like almost instantaneous. It's on the playa in the Black Rock Desert. And I was freezing and I froze out there for like, 7 days. And on the last day, I was not getting the picture of fly geyser that I wanted. But on the last day, my eyes opened up and this picture was in front of me the whole time. Nothing had ever changed. I had tried to like have this thing be something that I wanted it to be. And as soon as I got out of my way and I was able to relax, and in this case, it took me like 7 days to see as a photographer. That picture was in front of me the whole time. So I could barely, when I shot this picture, I could barely feel my fingers, but I was able to like click the shutter and get the picture that I wanted. But it was another example of me as a photographer to get out of my way and to like, everybody might be different. Some people might be able to go out there and see right away, knock yourself out. And as far as like black and white and color photography, I'm not good at color photography. I don't like color photography really. There's some that I like, but it's kind of like, because I see it every day, I don't judge it, but I leave really good color photography to the really good color photographers because it's just not my thing. But black and white landscape photography is something that I really enjoy. And I think it ends up being, again, not that I'm good, but you're usually pretty good at things that you like. This was another one. This is Superstition Mountain in Arizona. Again, it took 4 or 5 days for that little cloud above Superstition Mountain to come because there were not a cloud in the sky for like 5 days. So I had to sit there for 5 days waiting for that little cloud to go into the sky to shoot the picture that I wanted. But I love the area. So I love black and white landscape photography. And every one of these is like a child to me. There's a story behind every one. I can't really get into because it would be hours. But I'm out here, this is Capitol Reef, Cathedral Valley. With my son, we camped out in the South Desert Overlook. And, we're sitting on the ledge, which is about 1,000 feet down, and just enjoying the time with my son. And this is the image that I had seen before I went out. I went out there, this is one of the images I went out there for. And Capitol Reef is one of my favorite areas. And it's one of my favorite areas because it's not a tourist trap. Not knocking Zion or Bryce or any of those places or Yosemite because they're beautiful, but there's too many people there for me. And I don't like, to me, it's hard for me to relax when I'm on a bus going to see like a certain rock, So me and my wife, this is Alabama Hills. My house that I have in Alabama Hills is in the Alabama Hills, but this is before we got that house. And it took me like 3 days to find this rock. I knew this rock existed, but it took me hiking like 3 days to finally find this rock. And this is actually the first time I shot it. I shot almost the same exact composition, but technically I didn't like what I had shot. So I went back and shot it. And then I was lucky enough to be published by National Geographic. So I don't know how it happened, but somehow I'm a National Geographic photographer. But the good thing about it is it gave me access to resources. And I always wanted to go into Canyonlands. I had gone into the Schafer Trail before and spent like 4 days in there with a friend. But I wanted to go into the maze because the maze is like one of the last places in the continental US that actually got mapped. They actually had to drop geologists in via helicopter and pull them out after they mapped the area. And I had gone into this is the edge of the maze in the Needles District. And I had gone to the Needles District 3 times. This is the last time. So we went out. I hired a outfitting group out of Moab, and we went out into the maze for 10 days. And all I can say about it was an experience of a lifetime. I probably will never do it again, because after camping for 10 days and eating for 10 days and breaking down tents and not taking a shower, my hair was like dreadlocks. And on this morning, this is like the last morning, and I never got a shot of the Needles area that I really liked. And on the last morning, and traveling in the maze, you go like 5 miles in 10 hours rock climbing, just to get to the areas that we wanted to map out. And on the last day, you know, I was like, I just wanted to go home and see my mommy. I just was like so beat up and just wanted a shower and something to eat, you know. And the guy that I was with said, no, we're gonna go, there's one area I want to show you, and you know, we're gonna get up at 4 a.m. We're gonna have to hike up this mountainside, this plateau. It's about 1,500 feet in the dark. Don't trip, because if you fall, you're gonna die. And I was like, I do not want to do this. I just want to go home, you know. But I said, what the heck, you know, I'm gonna do it. And I got up and we went out and got up there for the sunrise. And this is what I saw. And it was on the last day out of 10 days of being beat up. And it was the shot of the Needles area that I really wanted. Been out to Southern Utah so many times. This is like the 3rd time I went to this location. This is the Factory Badlands. Never thought there'd be a spaceship again flying over this area, you know, but the 4th time I hadn't got the pictures that I wanted, but, you know, again, you know, 3 or 4 times out there and just waiting and waiting and waiting, I was able to capture the picture that I actually seen in my mind. And I love these areas. I spent time, this is Hunts Mesa. I'm gonna have to go faster, otherwise this is gonna be a very, very long presentation. But spent like 3 days up in Hunts Mesa with the Navajo guy, just me and him, you know. We heard walkers go through the tents. I learned all about the Navajos and their languages and everything. And what I really wanted to capture of Monument Valley, which has been like photographed a zillion times, is my vision was, what did the Navajo see the first time that they saw this area, Monument Valley, that made them call this home? And, you know, I just had to wait, you know, I had to wait 3 days. This is a sunrise over at a landing on Hunts Mesa. Same morning, just different composition. Same rock formation, again, that I had shown earlier, just a different composition from White Pocket. The same morning out of Trona that I showed that first morning we were camping out. This is the night before, as the sunlight just moved over Trona, over the area. I always wanted to see the dollhouse in the maze. And, you know, years before, the only way you can get out there is to take a raft and then hike like 3 miles and get picked up the next morning. But the maze was really amazing. This is like a highway in the maze. If you look, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this is the road right over here on the bottom in the center. And that's a really nice road in the maze. But this rock formation is called the Dollhouse. And I always saw it as like a Tim Burton type formation, something that would come out of one of his movies. So I felt so lucky just to get there, to see this with my own eyes. And a lot of this too, I have to say, a lot of these pictures for me are, I brought back really to show my children and my wife, you know, what I was experiencing when they weren't with me. And I'll get a little bit back into technically, what you're looking at here also, I have to add, is like, you know, 8-bit JPEGs, you know, streamed over the internet. Really, what my final vision of all these images are my prints. I'm really lucky to be represented by like 7 galleries internationally. I have a gallery in Paris. And again, this is not pompous. I'm saying how lucky I am. Santa Fe Photo Eye, Copecan Gallery in Los Angeles. Houston, I have a gallery. Boston, I have a gallery. So I'm really lucky. But what happened is that, so I'm represented as a fine artist, and my black and white prints are, have I think 6 museums have my collections now. And I actually have 3 books out, and I wanted to get to that. And again, this is not going to say this is not a pompous statement. I'm really, really blessed to have 3 books out, because for me, both the prints, which are my final vision of everything, and the books to me are somewhat eternal, because the way that I would illustrate it, this is just the way that I think, is that, I don't even know my great parents' names. They lived a life just like we lived, and probably a lot rougher than we're experiencing. So by having 3 books, I have 2 books by 21st Editions, and I have 1 by Aperture. I have something to leave behind when I'm not there anymore. I don't think I'm going to last too much longer. Even if I last 20 more years, that's a drop in the bucket in time. But at least I have something that I felt I wanted to leave something behind, just to show people that we existed here, and that how we saw the world, or how I see the world. This is the vastness of the maze. This is the land of standing rocks. And actually, just as an illustration, I went out there with a friend and my guide, and my friend got so freaked out because there was just nobody around for like probably 25 square miles, that we had to drop him off. He started, like, I don't know what it was, but he started freaking out, and we were like, he got to get him out of here. He's actually was getting scared, but this area was so vast, and we were the only ones there. Trona, you'll see lots of Trona pictures, but lenticular clouds. So I always loved going out in inclement weather. I always found the worse the weather, the more interesting it was to me, because light's changing, things are changing. Nothing, just the rocks aren't going to move. They're going to be there. They've been there for a long time. But if I'm going to take a portrait of these rocks, I want to get it in the right conditions. A lot of times, going back to the way that I paint, I say, for me, I try to paint, I see painting with light. So I have red filters and green filters and blue filters and cut filters and polarizers and things. And I do filter just like the zone system for film. And I do determine what the right way I think it is to photograph these images based on what the light is like. The good thing about National Geographic too, for me, that helped me, I think, with some of the galleries and, let's say, museums and things like that, is people like, these are manipulated pictures. But with National Geo, I actually had to send in my raw files on my 16-bit TIFFs and JPEGs and a match print, and get them to like certify that these were not manipulated pictures, so that they could publish them. So I saw this, just like, this is Alhambra Rock near Mexican Hat. And I just saw this like a teeth sticking out of the desert, lower jaw. This was, I ended up, I wanted to go to Iceland, but this is like an asteroid just about hitting the Earth. And I just happened to snap it just before it hit, But actually, just kidding around, but it's actually just a piece of ice on the shore. But Iceland, I love the light in Iceland. This picture to me illustrates how beautiful the light was in Iceland. And it really was, because the sun doesn't rise high up in the sky, and it's light for many hours during the day. For some reason, this is one of my favorite pictures. It's not everybody's favorite picture, I guess, but I haven't saw a lot of prints of this one, but I loved it because it just illustrated to me light and what I was trying to capture as far as my experience in Iceland, and what the shadows and the light was like. And a lot of these pictures fall. So what I shoot technically with a full spectrum camera. So there's nothing on it. I've taken out anti-aliasing filters. I've done that since 2005. Now they're like hot stuff that, you pay extra money not to have an anti-aliasing filter, but I never understood technically why we would use one, especially for landscape photography. And take off the cut filter, the IR cut filter that cuts everything, only allows in 400 and 700 nanometers of light. And I have a filter that is exactly the cut filter that goes over the sensor when it's manufactured. So I can shoot in black and white at like 400 to 700 nanometers, just like a straight up black, like Tri-X, let's say. But a lot of times I'll shoot full spectrum based on what the light is like, or I'll filter it a certain way based on what this is like a sunrise in New Mexico, full spectrum. So you're seeing into the ultraviolet. Ultraviolet would be like the 300 nanometer spectrum. Infrared would be like the 1,000 nanometer spectrum. When you cut, let's say for infrared, you see a lot of infrared pictures. They're just cutting out like from 300 to like 700 nanometers, and you're seeing from 700 to 1,000. I'm not an infrared photographer. I will use it when I want to. Like this is just straight up 400 to 700 nanometers, straight black and white. This is shiprock. I had to go back there because I had seen this picture in my mind, and it was more of a majestic picture of shiprock from a different angle. Trona, because I wanted to always capture this composition. I'm going to go a little faster. I'm at the Joshua Tree. I saw this when I walked up to this rock. I just saw this like a family, like the rock in the middle with the eye. There's a little eye. That's like the dad, and the mom is all the way to the left there, and the uncle's all the way to the right, and the punky kid with the spiked hair is right in the middle, the troublemaker. And I just saw them as like, okay, take my portrait. So I saw this as like a living portrait of a rock. So I called this one Rock Family. Owens Valley, when I first started shooting, I like this one, light and shadow. I just was lost in the Alabama hills and couldn't find my truck and turned around and on a sunrise. And I love this one just because it's simple. And I like simple. The other thing about cameras, I only have 2 lenses. So because my methodology is life is so complicated, and photography is my art. It's the way that I can express myself. I want my photography to be like really simple. So I only have 1 camera body. I have a spare in case it fails. And I use 2 lenses, like a 24 to 70 and a 70-200 zooms. And the lenses are, L lenses from camera, and the 24 to 70, I would say, is my prime, but it's super sharp at every aperture, at every focal length. I've had it mapped, and I like the zooms because it gives me the opportunity to be able to determine, what focal length, I want to shoot at. So this was an interesting one, and then I'll move faster. But I was went to Escalante with my son for Christmas. This is 2009 or 10, I think. Went to like Garden of the Gods and all that stuff in the snow. Froze, nothing for like 10 days, nothing, just nothing. Nice pictures, but I was so disappointed. And we were driving back to LA and went through with Virgin River Gorge and came out of a big snowstorm. And then we were like, hey, before we hit Las Vegas, I'm going to be like transparent and said, let's get out of because I got to pee, and got out of the car, and we both went and did our thing, went our separate ways. Let's like just stretch our legs before. And then I hear, Dad, come here, and I had my camera and I came over the hill, and this is what I saw. And after 10 days, this is like next to the last 3 shots I shot. This was like that shot of 10 days of frustration I kicked myself in the head again to say, why did you like give up? Why did you think that you would never get anything from the trip? Now, this was kind of a mistake, but it showed me that you just never know, and not to give up, and not to give up on myself. So that's just photography has made me be stronger as a person. And then I got into storms because I liked inclement weather. And the first time I went out, I could not believe what I saw. It was so surreal to me. This picture was captured, I think, 2011. But I wanted to capture an iconic tornado as part of the thing. I didn't go out for tornadoes. I wanted to go out for supercells up in the Northern Plains, these giant spaceships. And I met a storm chaser that I totally love. His name's Roger Hill. And I go out with him. I've gone out since 2009. And we've driven on his tours. We've counted. We've gone way over 200,000 miles now since 2010, just chasing storms. Sometimes nothing. We'll start in Minnesota and we'll end up in Colorado and we missed it. And sometimes you just never know. And the thing that happened with me with photography and with these storms is it really taught me how to focus. Compositions are changing every second. The clouds, the light is completely different. There's chaos going around you. People get scared and they scream and yell, you know. But I had to focus because I have to focus on my focus, my exposure, my shutter speeds, and I have to just really quiet my mind and be able to capture these things that I saw. And I saw this image in my mind and went out for these things. So, you know, none of these images are manipulated. I don't use like a light. Some people use lightning triggers that the pulse off the lightning. I usually, because I want my photography to be simple, and people yell at me for like, why don't you use like, you know, that technologies? These are more time exposures, and it's the look of the draw. I'm looking for things like when it comes to like lightning, it comes to, you know, looking at the areas that look electrified. And I also had to look at camera shutters or you know, the senses. Some senses capture full frame, one flash, and then there's rolling shutters, you know, that for more for video. So they capture the shutter rolls from top to bottom, just like video, to capture video, and you can lose things. So I had to learn a lot about the right ways to capture these storms. They showed me how small the world was. ABC News actually was with us on this one. They got destroyed. They had no idea what they were walking into. They were out there playing around, and this storm turned into this major hailstorm. I was able to get out like 6 pictures, and these giant hailstones started wrapping down. They hit those guys in the head, hit those cameras. They got like destroyed. But anyway, it was really interesting. I got published by Audubon Society, and I couldn't think of why, because all I could think of was that this storm probably killed a lot of birds, you know. But I get an email from this guy, and he's like, you know, that on the bottom right there's a house, and it's like, that's, I guess this is Moorcroft, Wyoming, and there is nobody in Moorcroft, Wyoming. There's some people there. I mean, maybe a population of 1,000 or so. And that's my grandmother's house. And we saw this Audubon Society magazine in the in one of the stores there. And you know, it's like, what were you doing there? So I ended up sending them the grandmother prints, you know, a big print for her living room. But it showed me how small this world could also be. This is the first time I went out in 2009. Roger was next to me, and I was like, are we gonna die from this, you know? And he's like, don't worry about it, just, you know, enjoy it. This tornado's dying as it's coming down. But I call this one the arm of God, because I just thought it looked like the arm of God coming down at us. Recently, this is Minnesota, a couple of years ago. These storms are just amazing. The thing about these storms is they only exist, that to me, they're these living things. They get created when the elements are right, whether it's the upper atmosphere, humidity, you know, the winds, all these things have to come together. You don't see storms like this on overcast days, because the way that it's illustrated is that it's almost like in Kansas, you know, it rains really hard in the cornfields, and then it gets really sunny and it's humid, and the water starts to bubble in the fields and it starts to rise. And then if the winds aloft start to pick up and everything turns right, the dew points turn right, these storms get created. And some of them are really violent when they get created, and they die really quickly. Some of them which take more form and mature. You know, when I first started chasing storms, I never even knew that like Kansas was next to Colorado. I had no idea, or that like Nebraska was next to Wyoming. I had no idea that the states were like that, you know. So they opened up my whole world to like these surreal things that were taking place in Tornado Alley. And I'm not a storm chaser. I know how to chase, but I go out with Roger because we get in front of these amazing storms. And all I want to do is take a portrait, because these storms are just fighting in the atmosphere to stay alive. And everyone's a little bit different. And none of them will ever be the same in the same place. You'll never get the same thing, and the compositions are always changing. So all I'm trying to do is capture the moment of what I'm seeing. When I went out to Shiprock, my wife, who is a huge inspiration of my life, she's helped me so much in so many different ways. We went out to, she was painting. She's a painter and she's an artist. And we went out to Los Alamos. And I wanted to, you know, didn't really knew a place in Los Alamos. But it was pretty amazing to be there. And I went out that next summer and I wanted to photograph the monsoons. And this is in New Mexico. And it ended up being like, these storms can be so powerful to me. They were almost like, you know, these nuclear weapons going off. Hopefully humanity will never be able to tap into the power of these storms. You know, they try to do things, you know, but the other thing with storms to mention too is that think of them as these vacuum cleaners. They only take place when the atmosphere is unstable. And when they come through, their job is to really stabilize the atmosphere. So usually if you see a storm come through, the next day is a really beautiful day because they had stabilized the atmosphere. You know, insurance companies are now out there like dropping, you know, stuff into the clouds to make sure the storms don't wreck the cornfields, you know, for financial reasons. But, you know, it's really dangerous to be able to do those things. But anyway, this is a monsoon. The Mattis clouds, the aftermath of a huge storm. This is shot in like the infrared. You know, I just thought, you know, infrared is really good sometimes for weather photography as far as like cutting through layers. Like if you look at even, how would you say, wedding photography, a lot of wedding photographers use kind of cut filters or infrared type cameras to cut through the first layer, like the subsurface scattering of your skin to take away blemishes, or like black basketball photographers or photograph so that you can see more of their tattoos because it kind of cuts through that first layer of scattering of the skin. The same thing happens with weather photography. So it matters what the fogs are like and stuff like that, whether I decide to shoot in infrared. Tornado, obviously. This is in Kansas a couple of years ago. Monster in the closet. This is at night. Luck of the draw. I was trying to photograph. I could not really see the storm until the lightning struck, and I was just trying to photograph what I thought was an electrified area and compose the best that I could, and I lucked out. I never thought there were storms in Canada, but the big ones. You know, this is a storm up in Canada, and this was a pretty amazing storm. This is a land spout in Kansas, and I've never seen anything like this before as far as scale. As an example of scale, if you look on the bottom on the horizon to the right, you'll see power poles. This thing is probably 3,000 feet high coming towards us. And what's around it is just a rain shafts. And I just did try to do the best I could do, but it was an unbelievable sight to see. And I wanted, you know, the combination for me of photographing supercells and monsoons, be able to be lucky enough to stand in front of a land spout. I've never seen a water spout, maybe someday. This is the same storm, different direction. This just reminded me of War of the Worlds, you know, this thing coming at us, you know, trying to eat us up. Minnesota, some of the storms are just beautiful. This tornado like ripped the roof off a house, you know, and this is shot more into the infrared again because there was a lot of fog. Straight up black and white. Most times, again, I'm just trying to take a portrait. This one was a storm that was moving really slowly. We were actually able to sit on a chair and watch this thing move by us, and I was able to have time to compose something that I wanted to compose. But again, it's just luck. This one was really interesting. I sold a lot of prints of this one for some reason. I think people thought this is a good snapshot of you know, a tornado and humanity combined. You know, for some reason it was shot full spectrum. This is not infrared, even though it captured a lot of infrared. That's just because of the light. Texas, I'm gonna keep on going. This one I really like because this is Colorado, and the way that lightning lights up the clouds. This one was good illustration to me of what I was seeing, but wasn't able to capture. It was just this really beautiful storm in the field. And the good thing about this, I like going up into the northern plains, um, because there's nobody really up there. There's obviously people there, but it's, you go up into Wyoming and you go up to Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, parts of Colorado, and there's not a lot of people there. And I see these storms as really being beautiful, and I actually see the earth as being really beautiful. And so I never want to capture things that show destruction or damage and things. And I'll leave that to, again, the photographers who are really good at capturing that stuff. But it's not what I see. I just see the earth as being this amazingly beautiful place. Canada, a spaceship someplace in Colorado. This is the first day I ever went out storm chasing. This thing was coming down the hill at us. This is Laramie Range in Wyoming. And I was so in shock of watching this thing. They actually had to drag me into the van because it was getting so close to us and it was electrified. But I was just like, I could not believe what I was actually looking at. And I started fooling around with being able to go, as far as light was concerned, into like positive and negative kind of space. This is my beginning of like, white kind of captures because of the light. And this is a full spectrum capture. Again, full spectrum. A lot of the where you see it's bright on the ground is just because of all the lightning strikes that have taken place. And then I went into like the negative space. I wanted to play around with dark and negative spaces and wanted to capture things that were maybe a little bit underexposed, but filtered in a way that captured the light differently. I wanted to be able to improve as a photographer, both in like, how do I focus these compositions, again, change every second. Challenge myself to be able to capture, in the positive and the negative space. This is in Texas. So I was challenging myself to capture positive and negative type captures. And again, this is more of the white. This is Montana. This is more into the infrared. Full spectrum. I took my son out, my youngest son, I took out with me because I can show you at the end, maybe. I wanted my youngest son to experience something with me that he would always remember for the rest of his life. My family is my inspiration. They're so close to me. And so my son was with me, and I wanted to capture a white tornado, but I wanted to be able to capture a white tornado, you have to be on a certain side of the tornado and the light has to be a certain way to be able to capture that. And I was lucky enough to capture that. This is the second day I was out, and I could not believe what I was looking at. This is a mesocyclone in Nebraska, Valentine, Nebraska. And if you look on the bottom near the horizon, that's the clouds being sucked into this thing. This thing was 60,000 feet high. Everything is white. The ground and everything is white. This is like maybe a 3-second exposure, but it's all white because there was so much lightning taking place at the time. And it was just sitting there and spinning in front of us. And I looked at Roger and I was like, I can't use the F word here, but I cannot effing believe what I'm actually looking at. And this addicted me to photography. I mean, to storm photography. In the rain, pouring rain, so I had to learn how to work in the rain and the beautiful parts of Montana. How am I doing, Steve, with time? Okay.
Let's ask Janice.
Yeah, so it's you have half an hour, so however
go.
you want to do the Q&A, it's up to you.
How much more time do I got? A half an hour to go?
Yeah, 30 minutes.
Okay, so I'll take 5 more minutes. I'll just go through this.
Mitch, as you go, there seems to be a difference between your exposures. We had this question, the length of your exposures in your landscapes and the length of your exposures in your weather and storm stuff. Is that true, or are you a less than a second person or a more than a minute person, or is it just vary completely?
It varies completely based on what I'm shooting. I would say the weather photography, everything's probably somewhere around a second to, some of the lightning stuff could be up to 10 seconds, maybe even 30 seconds. The landscapes, they just vary based on what the light is like. It could be mostly, I like longer exposures because things happen, light paints a certain way with a longer exposure that there's a softness to it that I really like. So times vary, but I would say I'm more of a longer exposure person, but I'm not like the one shot where of St. George with the mountain, when we came out of the storm, that was like a 3-minute exposure, but that was on purpose because of the way things were moving. This is the only stitched image that I have. This is short exposures, actually. The storm was so wide, this is New Mexico, that there was the only way that I could capture this storm without to be able to get it not distorted. This is actually the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, actually bought this print in Norman, Oklahoma, and hangs in the lobby. Arizona, how beautiful clouds are, almost killed me. This is someplace in Wyoming on the probably the 5th day I was out there. And then I'll get into landscapes. I live in Los Angeles. I love Los Angeles. This is the first picture I ever shot when I started shooting again in 2005. And when I first came to LA, when I came over the 405 near Mulholland, and I saw the San Fernando Valley, I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Little did I know, but I loved the valley. And I saw it as beautiful as Yosemite Valley. But I call this picture Civilization because what I see in Los Angeles is amazing landscapes, what humanity has done as far as building on top of this landscape. And again, we go back, the way I have seen this picture is, I wish I could take a time lapse of Los Angeles or this picture, and it would show that these buildings decay and fall and rise and fall and rise and fall over, let's say, 500 years. And that we think we own this land, and we don't. We're just borrowing it for this period of time that we're here on Earth. And but I do think Los Angeles is a beautiful city. So actually, for some reason, Metro saw my images and gave me a grant, and these images were in these light boxes in the Metro stations for like 5 years, rotating between all the Metro stations in LA. They were like 10-foot light boxes, and they took, I think it was like 8 or 10 of these images. And I went down, and I was really skeptical about doing this project, but they came out really well. And what I really liked about it was that, the city of Los Angeles came to me and said, we never seen anybody actually make LA look this way or look good. Usually it's kind of trashy and, that kind of stuff, So I was kind of honored that I live here. And if I didn't love Los Angeles, I wouldn't live here. I love Lone Pine and I live there, but I also love Los Angeles. I love this city. So these are some of my homage to the city of Los Angeles. And the next picture was just like when I took my son out to storm chase. I was like, Josh, I want a picture of you standing in front of a tornado, something that you'll never forget. And it ended up that this is like the picture of my son. And he's like, Dad, can we get the hell out of here now? I didn't believe that you would actually do this, So anyway, that's it. That's kind of my presentation. I'll go back and we'll stop on one image. And Stephen, I'll hand it back over to you for any questions or answers or anything like that.
So type your questions into the chat box if you have any specifics, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that I was thinking and in terms of you're walking through your landscapes and talking a lot about sunsets and sunrises. I shoot architecture, and I'm also the sunset and sunrise person. I'm not much of a morning person, but I'm definitely the sunset guy. And a lot of times I'll tell my clients, look, we're going to go out, we're going to have a 3-hour lunch because there's just not a lot happening between noon and 1. Do you also find that too? Are you when you're saying painting with light, are you at the ends of the day?
No, I actually, what I do is I wait for nature to show itself. Like this might be, I think this was, by the time I finished this, is like 9 a.m. But I think like this shot here was, mid-afternoon. The sun was going down, but it wasn't. But a lot of these pictures are just, I'll go out to these locations, and especially in inclement weather, light changes.
Yeah.
A lot of the pictures, what I really like, actually, my favorite times actually would be pre-sunrise and post-sunset, because what I really like is the light, the soft light that, let's say, bounces off the sky and lights a subject like a rock.
Yeah, that directional soft light.
Or really
Coming from
indirectional
somewhere.
soft light. And what happens is, for me, especially with being able to like filter the light correctly, is you have to stare at like this a rock. Like I'm going to go back a little bit. Let's see which way I'm going. Like this picture, you really have to like stare at it to see like the subtle shadows that you're going to capture.
Mhm.
It might not be really evident as the sun's coming up or the sun's going down, but for me, I have to really study the subject and the light, and sometimes it's not really evident that it's there, and that will allow me to determine how I want to filter it and what my exposure might be like. This is a longer exposure, obviously, from the clouds. But the other thing is, with all this stuff too, is like everybody has their own vision of the world. And I think the thing as a photographer is to capture your vision of the way that you see the world, that not to plagiarize or to, you can stand on the shoulders of other photographers and use them as that, but to really come to a place where you really feel that the images that you're capturing, you're not trying, your ego goes out of the way, and that you're trying to capture the way that you just see the world, and that it's not about being some famous photographer doing some great works and making a lot of money and all that stuff. But just, to me, if you can get to that place and the work is really good things will happen. It's, as I'm saying, my words are kind of thin. The images to me do the talking, and I don't want my words to get in the way of what the images mean to people. Like, I've been lucky enough that people seem to like the work. I don't know why. I just try to keep it simple.
Yeah.
That's a long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, that one of the other things, and there's a question along these lines, is that having photographed in infrared myself and realizing that was a constraint because the film was sensitive to just that piece of the spectrum. Your approach, where you have a camera that can take ultraviolet, it can take the middle range that's visual, it can take infrared, or a combination of either or both, or and you're really sort of tuning your camera to the scene and to your vision. And it was also nice to see that when you took a picture of your son, that was still in color. So I wasn't sure if you were taking
that was my iPhone. Yeah.
Family portraits in black and white too. But
see, my color wasn't that good.
Yeah. How serious are you?
Yeah.
But there's a question, is like, what's been your evolution in sensors? Did you start out full spectrum right off the bat in 2005, or I know you say you're working with a Canon 5DR, I guess, the 50
Yeah.
one now.
Well, I think,
but how did
I
that
started.
evolve?
Yeah, I started with the first camera that I actually had was it was like a Sony 828 something, and it had like, Sony got in trouble because with that camera, because it had something called night vision. And oops, did I lose my thing? I lost my share, I think.
You overshared.
I overshared. I'm gonna go back to it. But it was an 828 and it had night vision, called night vision. They got in trouble because it went into it flopped down, it flopped up the IR blocking filter, but it only lets you shoot at like 1 second at f like 2.8. So during the day it would be overblown. But they got in trouble because infrared can see through clothes. So some like bathing suits and things. So Sony got in trouble, and they stopped making that camera because I think they got sued or something. They didn't realize what was going on. But that was my first camera, and then I went to an R1. So it's funny because the R1, the Sony R1, to me, the 828 was the first mirrorless camera, digital camera, and that's why I had bought it, because I did not understand why there was a mirror box in a digital camera. Because I understood it because, for today, for like focus, for sports photography and things like that. But it made no sense to me. I always thought, like, video cameras didn't have a mirror box in them. But if you look through a viewfinder, you're not seeing the feed off the sensor. You're seeing the feed off a mirror. You're not. So I went to an R1, which was the next camera, and that's the one I modified. I took off the anti-aliasing filter. I had it modified. And there's a great guy out of New Jersey who he's a optical scientist who helps him with these things. And it was funny because I have a Storms book that's out by Aperture, and I was so lucky, first of all, to be published by Aperture, because Ansel Adams started Aperture. I actually talked to the San Francisco Art School of Art, which is like the school that he was at in San Francisco. I was like shocked that, or honored that I was there, but Aperture published that, and most of the pictures on that book with a 10 megapixel R1. And the thing with that R1 that I really loved was technically the photo sites on that were like, I'm going to get technical, but like 7 microns. They were huge. And the bigger the photo sites are, the more rich the captures were. So I really pushed that camera, and that's what got Sony's attention. And almost all the pictures in that book were a 10 megapixel camera. But it just shows that these, you could push, these cameras. Like now, I shoot with a 50 megapixel camera. I was concerned that the photo sites are tiny. They're like 3 microns or 4 microns compared to 7. But they've done enough with the next generation of sensors that I was really happy with it. But again, I do not use the viewfinder. Mine's got a piece of tape over it. I only shoot off a live view because for me, that's my ground glass. And I want to see the sensor, and I want to see the way that I'm filtering, and I shoot in a monochrome mode.
Right.
So technically, let's go back, and when I'm looking at it in a monochrome mode, it's an 8-bit image on an LED. But for my prints, I kind of do a reverse out. So I print on Epson printers. So I have my print. My print is my hallmark. It's my baseline, and I calibrate my monitor on my iMac, let's say, to match as closely to the print as possible. And I shoot in a monochrome mode with a custom white point to be able to emulate as close as possible to what my monitor might look like in monochrome. Or what my LED looks like in a monochrome mode, so that I know I'm coming pretty close to what my print might be like, though I know that I have more to push because I'm shooting raw as compared to looking at the 8-bit JPEG. So that's kind of technical, but that's why, that's my methodology for my zone system for being able to come to a print. And all I can say with printing is, people think, not here probably, but some people think that, printing, you go to Kinko's and you make a print and it's great. I have burned probably $100,000 worth of inks and rips and papers and things to come out to the best possible way to, I had Epson come here, and they probably took out 20 pounds worth of stuff out of my print and said, okay, now you're ready for black and white printing, Also, Nick Brandt is somebody who's a photographer who was really close to me and helped me a lot. He was the one he called me one day out of the blue, or he sent me an email and said, call me. I'm Nick, and I seen his work, and he ripped into my work. When I showed him my work, man, it was the best feedback. He ripped into it. It was the best constructive criticism I could have possibly got. It helped me so much with my printing process, and actually purchased his printer from him. That was my first 9800 from Nick. So I give Nick a lot of credit to get me from 20% as far as the printer, probably to, I would say, 70%, and then 70 to where I am today, which might be wherever. I try to get 1% better everything I can possibly do with printing. 16-bit printing has come along. It helped me a lot as far as the rips. So, I haven't talked a lot about that. I've spent so much time printing and be able to get as best possible black and white prints as I can possibly get.
Now, is anything that you're doing in achieving your final, as Ansel put it, performance on print, is anything using that color that's still tied up in your raw file before you make that into a grayscale?
Yeah, so I all I do is I shoot in RGB. I don't shoot with monochrome camera. I've talked to my people and done my investigation on it. There might be a time where I go to that. For what I'm doing right now, RGB is working really well. But all I do in my to be able to grade my file is I just take saturation and turn it to 0. And there's ways you can go to to do grayscale as far as the way that you can work in Photoshop. I don't work in Lightroom. I work in Photoshop. And there's nothing wrong with Lightroom. I just want to keep it simple, and I know kind of Photoshop's the engine of Lightroom anyway. And Lightroom's awesome. I just don't. It's not my preference.
Are you using it for cataloging, or are you bypassing it altogether?
Bridge.
Oh, okay.
Cataloging my own way. Go through my images in Bridge and use Photoshop. And just my methodology is really to just turn 16-bit raw, saturation to 0, and do the best I can. But just like with when I get to the 16-bit TIFF, well, 12 to 10-bit raw, 12-bit raw to 16-bit TIFF. The more that you grade an image, the more data you're throwing away. So for anybody, I'm sure everybody knows, but for anybody who doesn't, if you take an 8-bit image or a JPEG and you start pulling it around in Photoshop, and then you go look at your histogram, you'll see it looks like a tooth comb. It's because you threw away all that data. So I've learned to do as little bit of grading as possible on the TIFF, because every piece of data that I could save makes for a better print. So I try to do my rough grading, let's say in a JPEG, to get roughly where I want to go, get as close as I can in RAW, and then almost do as little as possible in a 16-bit TIFF.
Right. Are you bracketing at all, or are you?
And I don't crop.
One-shot guy?
No, I don't shoot a lot of frames. So I would say for me, if I go out, let's say on a landscape or something, I might fill up a 32 gig, compact flash or something, but I don't shoot that much. I would say, like this shot that might be in front of us, I might be shot 10 images of it, over a course of 2 hours.
And cropping, is this pretty much?
No, I don't crop. Maybe sometimes a little bit off an edge and stuff like that, but I just try to. I see as close. Just I guess it's from my film background, as close as I can come to a perfect latent image in my exposure, the best. Of course, you shoot to the right a little bit, to be able to capture as much data as possible into the shadows, for your final grade. But the census is so good now that you don't have to push it too far.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something that speaks to me, because I do my work a lot of times ends up in the Library of Congress, and that's legacy. Can you talk a little bit about legacy? Sort of how you see this. Obviously, National Geographic and Audubon and other people have now published it, and you have books, and those performance prints are up in galleries and on walls. I'd love to hear just your opinion about a little bit more about that after we're gone concept.
Yeah, I have my 21st editions libraries in the Library of Congress, I think, is at the National National Library in Washington, D.C., whatever that's called. And I think in the museum, there's like 6 or 7 museums. The thing for me is, with the books, I wanted to do books that I see books as being something, and let's say prints being something that will be invaluable. Let's say maybe 50 years from now when we're not around, in the world of Instagram and fast food and all that other stuff. I don't know, the next generation of people, what they, I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that a lot of the book publishers are having a hard time, and it's hard to get a really good quality black and white book published. Meridian, these people out of Boston are really good. There's people out of Germany. But 21st editions published the last book. One of the books they did is an edition. It's an edition of 36, and they're platinum prints, and they're handmade books. And they, the one thing that I would just inspire people from is all the galleries that rep me and the book publishers. They all came to me. I never promoted my work. I just showed images. I never went out and said any promoted this. National Geographic called me. I never sent work to them.
So where did they see them? I mean,
I don't know where they exactly, but I've honestly been published. I have so many places that I've been published that I can't even keep magazines that I've been publishing, but the Boston Public Library bought that last platinum edition book for $16,000, and I was like shocked, and it sold out. The book started at like $10,000. The other book that they did was an experiment. I think they sell for like $1,500, but they handmade books, So they have a 21st edition has a very eclectic, let's say, collector. But I wanted to do a book that was more available to like the masses. So that's where Aperture came in, and that's like a $50 book. Now it's like, forget it. That even sold out. It was like 8,000 copies, But the thing that I didn't mention is really the first place I think that I was published was somebody said, put your work up in Luminance Landscape. And I put my work up there. And the way it kind of dominoed was somebody on that said, send your work into Lenswork.
right.
And I was like, I bought a Lenswork, and I was like, I can't send my work there. It's like famous photographers are in Lenswork. These guys are like I'm not in that league, So they took it. So I did it anyway, and I sent it in, and then I got a call from Lenswork, and it's like, we're going to publish your work, and you get the cover. And then the cover happened, and then I got calls from galleries, and then things started to just domino from that. And I got published by Lenswork, I think 4 times. And then they did a monograph recently, and I really wanted to do the monograph with them because it was like $30, and it was, I don't know, I can give it out. They gave me like, a couple hundred copies I purchased, and I was able to like get my work out there to people. And even with the galleries now, prints have gone, I've seen my prints go from like a couple $100. I think my cheapest print now is like 1,500, and they sell for like 20,000, and I sell prints. And it's like, it's not about the money. The money's good, obviously, and it's helped my family, and it's been a blessing but there's nothing that's been more honorable to me. And I'm not just saying it to sound like really cute and cool and stuff like that, but there's nothing more honorable to me to have like somebody purchase a print and then have that print hang in their home, and they live with it every day, and it inspires them. And as an artist, it blows my mind, that somebody would think that my work is actually that good. But those things have come to me. And again, to inspire others, it's come to me because I think people are inspired for some reason by the work, but I just do my thing. I live in my little vacuum and try to capture the world the way that I see it. So I count myself very, 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 very lucky, very lucky that I even still have hair, so.
Right. Well, looks like we're wrapping up here. One last quickie question. Whose prints do you have hanging in your house?
Pente. I don't know if you know Pente, a Finnish photographer.
I'll look him up.
Oh no, Pente is, if you want to see somebody who is, first of all, the most amazing prints, because his prints are tiny. And what I love, I'm going to get it, but the whole thing of going to like Photo LA and seeing this giant print that's an out of focus leaf drives me crazy, Pente's images are these little tiny images. They're like 6x6, like Michael Kenna size. And the thing about images is that these prints is that, you know, they're much more personal. You have to actually go up to them and put your nose to them and take a look. And he's got the most amazing compositions. So look at Hente Saba. I can't even pronounce his last name. Finnish photographer. And I have a bunch of that's, and, you know, I have all the Ansel Adams books. I have one of his signed copies, and I collect a lot of books, you know. Michael Kenner, I really like. I feel sorry for him for all the people who copy his work, you know, but he's the original, you know. And Nick Brandt has always been somebody who I've been close to. He inspired me initially with a lot of his work.
And fabulous books from Nick Brandt too.
Yeah, those are the three. Hente is the main one, you know.
Well, cool. All right. Well, that was great. Julia had to leave us, but said thank you all for coming, and thanked
Okay.
me, and thanked Mitch. And Janice, why don't you wrap it up, and we will do it again in a couple weeks.
Well, on behalf of the Los Angeles Center of Photography, thank you so much, Mitch. That was incredible. Your work
Really
is amazing. And the Schafer, thank you for moderating this evening.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you, Steve.
Everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.